The Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett.
Everybody's talking about consciousness. Everybody wants that eternal kiss. Yeah, everyone's saying there's more than this. Everyone wants to follow their own bliss. Talking about one love, one blood, one life in everyone. One life, give each other. We are sisters and brothers. We sing Om Shanti.
On the Expansion Zone, we examine life and our quest to understand who and what we are and of the vastness of human potentials. We explore the making of our world from quantum physics to parapsychology, health, sociology, and philosophy, along with practical living. You are reminded of the possibilities in creating personal change. So for an hour, we'll stimulate and expand the mind.
Om Shanti, 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 Shanti. Sing the world, let's do it together. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. It's time to wake up. Shanti, Shanti, to a brighter day. Realize.
Well, welcome once again to another edition of the Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett. I am, of course, your host, Sonia Barrett. And as always, wishing you a wonderful Monday, or the best Monday possible. You know how that is. It's the start of the week. And so many things are changing right now. So for some people, yes, you're still at in our offices, in our homes. But there's, again, a lot of changes happening. So some people may be back out. Who knows? But whatever it is, make it a great Monday. And I do thank you for tuning in wherever it is that you are. And as I said before, things are changing. So there's some positive changes coming about, I think, in general in the world, or at least in the United States anyway. There's some changes that are definitely coming. And I, for one, am extremely ready for stepping over to the other side of all of this. And I've been vocal, but not necessarily on the air, about some of this for me anyway, the challenges. So I know many people have experienced a lot of challenges behind just the entire experience. But anyway, hang in there. We are almost on the other side of this, but this is an opportunity for what? To enhance how we take care of ourselves. Self-care, sharpen your self-care skills, tools, knowledge, and just take action. That's, I think, if nothing else, this is something that we have learned from this experience that we've had. At least people should at this point. All right. So I do want to thank you, our wonderful listeners, for your continued support during the fund drives. And we do ask that you continue to support KPFK, because it certainly allows my show to stay on the air. And of course, all these other shows that you love so much. So the support in the fund drive is what definitely continues to support this station since 1955. It's 1959, rather, that it's been here. All right. Well, today's topic, before we go to today's topic, let me give you my quote for the day. And everybody probably knows this quote, but it's by Albert Einstein. Reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And it's definitely one of my favorite quotes, because it is so true. But the topic today is hope and evidence of afterlife connection. And my guest is Mike Anthony, author of Love, Dad, How My Father Died, Then Told Me He Didn't. And he's also featured in the Netflix series Surviving Death. So just to talk just for a quick second about the quote, reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And I think the importance of stepping outside the box, which I'm always talking about, stepping outside of our safe space, our safe thinking, our safe beliefs, our safe perceptions, about reality. It really requires that we really step outside of that space. Let's allow ourselves to be open to a bottomless level of possibilities about reality, really, that is there to be explored. So that's what I have to say about that, and fully encourage that. Really, really encourage that. That's how we keep pushing the envelope as human beings, or humanity, for as long as we've been on the planet. We somehow have to, somebody continues to push the envelope. So, all right. So, a short bio here. My guest, Mike Anthony, has been a professional actor and not professional. That's what it says. Bartender since he graduated from Wayne State University with a Master of Arts degree in theater. His first book, Life at Hamilton, chronicles the extraordinary time he spent as a theater bartender with an up close perspective of Hamilton, an American musical as it rocketed into Broadway history. Beyond his life in theater, Mike's journey took an unexpected turn when his dad passed, leading him down a remarkable path of discovery. He now spends a good portion of his time exploring evidence suggestive of the survival of consciousness beyond the demise of the physical body. Um, let's see, a part of Mike's story is told in the Netflix documentary series Surviving Death. Of course, his website is mikeanthony.com. All right. Well, I'm excited to welcome you, Mike Anthony, to the Expansion Zone.
Hi, Sonia. Thank you so very much for having me.
All right. Well, you certainly have been on a journey, a curious journey, but one that was triggered by difficult circumstances, as we've all, had that moment of being exposed to those difficulties. So let's say, would you give us maybe a just short summary of just the events um, that brought about the Love Dad book? I mean, if we're going to get into it, but anything that you think would just sort of summarize how you ended up writing this book.
Sure. Yeah. I think the quote that you started with is perfect for this topic. And the idea of reality being this very persistent illusion is something that I've thought about my whole life. I fell in love with science when I was a young kid. And of course, science tells us, mainstream science anyway, tells us that there's no possibility of life after death, that the thing that we think of as ourselves is also an illusion created by the brain. And it's just a result of chemical reactions that are happening in the brain. And that once the brain stops getting oxygen, that sense of self disappears, and that person is gone forever. So that was heavily on my mind, that notion, when my dad suddenly passed in 2011. He from our perspective, out of nowhere, died. And it was this terrible shock, and it was a shattering event. And it sent me into what I would call an existential crisis, because I was thinking that if someone as amazing as my father, with all of that love and everything that he ever was, could suddenly just disappear as though he'd not ever been here, I was having trouble understanding what the point of anything was, and as I and my family were sitting in this well of deep, despair, an amazing event came into our lives when a person calling herself a medium, a complete stranger, told us that my father, who she had never known in her life, out of body, was tapping her on the shoulder, desperate to get a message to his family that he was okay. And so that's the nutshell of how I started down this path.
Yes, it's always amazing though, and of course everybody takes this differently. For some people, of course it's accepted. This is what happened. But for people like yourself or myself or some of our listeners that really decided to take it a step further and got all these signs and signals from loved ones, it is incredibly fascinating. Now, just to go back really quickly, what were you like prior to that in terms of your thinking? I mean, is this something that you would ever question, or it just didn't come up, that part of it? Is there life after?
Yeah, it's something I've always thought about since I was a young kid. I remember having this fleeting notion when I was really little that someday my parents were not going to be here, and that thought was terrifying to me. And so, like most of us, I pushed the thought away. The idea of death, I tried to just keep it out of my consciousness as much as possible, and I was able to do that and live a happy life. And even though the science that I also loved was telling me that death was a real thing and that it was the end of us, I was able to put that aside, because at the same time, I also always felt this connection to something. I've always believed that there's much more going on than meets the eye, and that there are places that our science probably can't get to. And this goes back to your opening quote again about the persistence of this illusion of reality, because, our physical being, our eyes, our ears, our sense of touch, we're only set up to experience a very thin sliver of reality, right? The electromagnetic spectrum is this big spectrum going all the way from long radio waves up to gamma waves on the other side. And our eyes see just the tiniest part as visible, right? So
Absolutely.
what we look at and think of as reality isn't not at all what reality looks like to a bat, for instance, or other animals. So the idea of life after death had always been on my mind, even from when I was young. But when my dad passed, suddenly that vague belief or that vague sense that we're much more than our bodies wasn't enough anymore. And I was being crushed by the scientific notions, the mainstream scientific notions about death.
Right. Now, I want to ask you this because, I've experienced this with loved ones, people that I was close to, like my aunt, who was also like a mom to me. But when people pass, people that you're that close to, I was able to feel it in the air, as if I could feel that person to some degree was missing, at least physically, but energetically, it's like they were missing from my reality. Like I knew that they were gone, like the whole energy of the whole, it was like the whole world, like, like pulling a toothpick or a stack of sticks. You pull one out. So even though, yes, there were experiences that would come to let me know these people, that these beings, they were still there, I could still feel them missing. Like, does that make sense? Like
It does.
Yeah, like because they have their own signature. There's a signature to the individual, the impact they make on life.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely felt that. And I write in the book about seeing my dad in the coffin for the first time, and that it was such a bizarre experience because I couldn't understand, if you had a strong enough microscope and you looked at my dad's body in that coffin, it would look exactly the same as it had a week before when my dad was perfectly well and alive. Under a microscope, it's the same exact stuff, right? It's the same protons, neutrons, and electrons. So what was it that gave those protons, neutrons, and electrons their very distinct dadness? I knew those.
Right. And animated the body.
Yes. Yes. What was it and where did it go? But yeah, I felt that sense of loss that you're talking about now, that missing, that something was missing. I felt that acutely.
Yes, it's really strong. I mean, and it's almost hard to explain unless somebody really knows what you're talking about, because I remember sitting at work back then when my aunt passed, and it was like something, reality as we know it in this life was never going to be the same.
Yes.
because this person, this essence was extracted from our world, and it was as
Yes.
if the whole world, should be aware that something, our
Mhm.
world has changed because this person is not here in it with anymore.
Oh, I completely understand that. I absolutely get what you're saying. Yes, I felt the same thing, same way.
Yeah, so it does. I mean, and then leading into these other aspects now that you ended up experiencing, but just that aspect really lets you know the energy, the frequency, the all of that scientifically, uh, what we hold, the impact that we're having on reality here and beyond this time, this timeline. So what was the first um experience, and when what happened to really get you on the path of dad, wow, is that you? I remember you talked about the radio, the song on the radio.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, that was one of the first things, and this blew me away. When my dad was here in body, he used music to communicate with my sister and I a lot. He didn't express his love in words very often. It was in his actions. He was an intensely loving man, but it was all through action. And we have this wonderful memory where he put us in the car when we were maybe 10 or 11, and he played the Carole King song "Child of Mine," and he said, "I want you to listen to these words. This is how I feel about you." So he'd always used music as a way to communicate what he found important in life to us. So the day after he died, we were in his house going through some things, and my sister and I found a piece of scrap paper with the words "Believe, tell Jen" on it. Jen is my sister's name.
Wow.
It was like a little 2-inch piece of scrap paper that he'd torn off. So we didn't know what that meant. And then further down in the pile, there was another scrap paper that said "Believe, a country song." So we realized that my dad must have heard this song on 2 different occasions on the radio and had meant to tell my sister about it, but he'd never gotten around to doing it. And it broke our hearts holding these pieces of paper, knowing that he had meant to tell her about this song and he'd never gotten around to it. So anyway, the next day or a couple of days later, we're getting ready to have the wake, and my mom decided she wanted to have some music at the wake. And so we're putting a playlist together, and I said, "Oh, go to iTunes and type in "Believe" in country music and try to see what that song is." And it turns out it's a song by Brooks and Dunn, and the song is about a man who had lost his wife and his daughter, but he was okay because he had come to believe without question that he was going to see them again and that life goes on beyond death.
Amazing.
And we were shocked because what are the chances that a song would be about life after death? There aren't a whole lot of songs, popular songs that are like that. So anyway, that was incredible. Then a few days after the funeral, I was driving back to New York from Connecticut to go back to work. And for the first time, I was alone. And you know how it is when you're setting up a funeral and you're kind of in shock and you're maybe not really truly
You're
experiencing.
distracted.
Yes, totally distracted. And I was in my car, and for the first time, his death really hit me, and I started to sob in the car, and I was like, I'm going to have to pull over because I can't see, I'm crying, and I always listen to my own music when I'm driving. Right, I get in the car, I plug in my phone, and this goes all the way back to iPods, and I never listen to the radio. It's always my own music. On this day, I simply didn't have the strength to plug my phone in. So the radio happened to be on in the background. I didn't turn it on. It just happened to be on quietly in the background. And as I'm sobbing on the highway, I suddenly hear this song, and I start, I go to turn it up, and I'm actually afraid to turn it up because I'm thinking if I'm hearing what I think I'm hearing, I'm going to lose control of this car, but sure enough, I turn it up, and it's that song. And I hear the words, "You can't tell me it all ends in a slow ride in a hearse." It's that song, "Believe," that we had found, which, by the way, had not been a popular song. It was on the radio maybe a decade before, and no one in my family had ever heard the song before. So that was the first sort of I guess what we would call an after-death communication that I experienced.
That was just, I love it. I love those things when they happen, and you are available to recognize that this is communication starting. Even if you go, well, you try to rationalize it after, which typically is what we do. We try to talk ourselves out of it, but then the evidence becomes, more and more and more. But there is that. And of course, yeah, finding the paper. It said, Mark, believe and tell Jan. And then there's you with the camera, with taking all these pictures before. So isn't that interesting? Because it's as if the future things already happened in a way. It's like they happened, and and so you're preparing all of this because it's known. You're getting the pictures and all this stuff. He's leaving a note because it's known. And then now here comes that moment in time. So fascinating.
Yeah, it definitely, when I look at it all now as a whole, I mean, it definitely seems orchestrated. For me, there's no other way to look at it. It seems like the entire thing was orchestrated leading up to me writing this book, which I hope will bring comfort to people. That's the entire point of it. So yeah, it feels like strings were pulled and it was all meant to be.
It was all, it was all known. And that's the feeling you definitely get. I certainly, when my father died, I remember, well, he was sick. Not for a very long time, but he was sick. He had pancreatic cancer. It was many years ago. And I remember my mom sitting by his bed because they wanted him to pass at home. So she was sitting, and we were up for a while. Then I remember I went to lie down, and suddenly I guess sort of sleeping, and I find myself, it looks like a dream, but it's not. And I'm outside, and I bump into my father. I always remember, all I could see is the t-shirt because I'm short. So like I bump into his belly. And so right then, as soon as I bumped into him, leaving the house outside in this this white t-shirt, and it was sort of misty dark, and I jumped up, and right then was when I went in the room. He had just passed. So I caught, he was passing, and I ran into him.
Wow.
Isn't that something? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So many amazing stories like that. And I'm sorry to hear about his loss. But I'm glad you had that experience. And like you said, if we allow ourselves to be open to these things, there can be some fascinating occurrences.
Yes, absolutely. Just being open. So what are some of the other experiences that you had in terms of your search after that, in terms of finding more confirmation, just, piecing scientific facts together with, at the same time, with your ability to stretch your own mind, because you have to do both. You can't completely confine it to certain restrictions of science, but yet you can utilize the science at the same time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, science, the word is a method, right? We too often confuse the word science with the body of knowledge that has been accumulated.
Absolutely.
And we can kind of very easily give up our own investigative powers, right? And sort of acquiesce to what we're told. If someone has a degree in whatever and they're in a lab coat, we can very easily accept what they say, and it can become our reality without a whole lot of our own input. We kind of surrender our intellectual autonomy somewhat. And what I discovered through my own experiences is that science is definitely not a completed mission, right? It's not final. No, certainly not. And it's never been. And why we would think we're always at this new precipice, right? I mean, if you go back to Galileo and Copernicus and Pasteur, so many times we've thought we've known a thing, and then someone new comes along with a new insight, and we realize we were completely wrong. Like, and in some cases, we were really, really wrong, right, about things. but I guess it's a certain kind of an arrogance that we think, well, now we've got this stuff figured out. Now with the stuff that we have, we've got this down. But the fact is we don't. I now know that personally that we definitely don't. So what happened in my own experience is once this woman who calls herself a medium got in contact with our family, I was intrigued, and I then started to investigate mediumship. And through an amazing few years, I started testing mediums in a controlled way, and I was shocked to discover that information was coming through that I could not understand any quote unquote normal way for them to have. And once I was getting these results, I'm just an actor and a bartender, right? I'm not the person who should be necessarily investigating this stuff. It felt to me like there should be people much smarter than me who are out there looking into this. And I was surprised to find out that there have been tons of people, many scientists of note throughout history, who have looked into this stuff and concluded that mediumship is a genuine phenomenon, that there are people out there who are able to get information in a way that we don't yet understand. And even more surprising is that there were current studies going on. The University of Virginia, for one, the University of Arizona. Right now, currently, there's research being done at the Windbridge Research Center. And these are studies done in double-blind, triple-blind studies. And they have concluded that they call it, to give it as scientific of a name as possible, they call it anomalous information reception. Somehow, some people, they've determined under controlled settings, are able to get information that there's no normal way for them to get. And that was very surprising. And then that sent me down the rabbit hole looking for other evidence suggestive of the survival of consciousness, or at least the independence of consciousness from the human brain. Because again, just to go back for a second to mainstream science, according to our mainstream paradigm, consciousness is something created by the brain. And when the brain stops functioning, that consciousness is gone. The other way to look at it, that there are some scientists, but by not the mainstream, the other way to look at it is that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of the universe, just maybe like gravity is, or the strong nuclear force. It's a fundamental aspect of the universe, not an emergent property of brain activity. And there's a ton of evidence suggestive of that. And I started to really look into it.
Right. Well, this is, it's when you think about it, we can be very primitive as well in our thinking as human beings. We might not think that, but some of it is very, very primitive. The wanting to lock reality, I like to say, in a box, in something that is safe and secure, because we don't like the unknown.
Yes.
So because of that, we like to confine it to some sort of knowledge level that it becomes final. It's like, okay, that's it. And it's like, it's bottomless. I mean, that's what I've discovered is whatever we discover now, 50 years from now, or even next week, or, that's why it keeps changing. Just as you said, is because the more we can stretch our minds and allow ourselves to see and be less arrogant, the more we're going to keep finding out there's just endless levels to what the possibilities are. Reality.
Yeah, agreed. And our cutting edge science is leading us in that direction. If we start to look at, quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and theoretical quantum physics, we are baffled by how things work at the quantum level. So for instance, I had a scientist say to me that what I was telling him, that it seems to me that some mediums are able to get information from deceased people. He said, it can't be possible because it can't be possible. That's literally what he said. And that made absolutely no sense. And when you start to look at quantum physics, right, we know that there are atoms and they're made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons, right? But beyond that, we don't know much at all. We've theorized about quarks and then gluons and things like that. But if you want to start to talk about what makes up quarks, we have to get into absolute theory. We do not know. So one of the leading theories is string theory, for instance, that a lot of your listeners, I'm sure, have heard of, right? And in that theory, a string of energy, whatever that is vibrating at a certain rate. And the rate of the vibration is what gives it its chemical properties and changes how it relates to other things in its environment, right? But if you ask a string theorist, for instance, Brian Greene is a leading string theorist, what is making the string vibrate? He will not be able to tell you. We have no idea why that string would be vibrating, right? So all of that is to say that we have built our science, we've built our equations on a foundation that we do not understand, that we've never seen. We've never seen the foundation. So for any scientist to tell you that anything is absolutely impossible, to me, that seems rather absurd when we don't even understand the foundational level that our reality, quote unquote, is built upon.
Absolutely. We're going to take a break right now, but definitely what you just said is my same argument, is that when you're talking about the vibration of the string and they're not even sure where that's coming from, that's that bottomless, indefinable. You can't put a name on it, but there is a series of actions that are happening throughout the course of, what we call reality or creation. There's like an echo. It's this endless thing that is going on.
Yeah.
And to me, it just made sense that you can't lock it in. You can't pin it down.
Right.
Where's the origin? It's this bottomless, this is just all you can say. It's like there is no end to where it's coming from. So I'm fascinated by that. But let's take a break. And then, of course, when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Mike Anthony, who is the author of the book Love, Dad, How My Father Died, Then Told Me He Didn't. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back after this brief message. And we are back. And of course, we're coming to you from KPFK 90.7 FM in Southern California and streaming live at kpfk.org. You are listening to The Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett, and that's me, of course. And we are speaking with my guest, and Mike Anthony, who is the author of the book Love, Dad, How My Father Died, Then Told Me He Didn't. And it's a fascinating conversation. Today I'm having a time talking. It's one of those days where no matter what you say, it comes out like so the body does weird things. So anyway, so we're having a great discussion about this. And I wanted to ask you, have you seen the short-lived TV series called Proof?
I don't believe so, no.
Oh, you've got to check it out.
Okay.
I'm so surprised that I'm not really surprised, but they canceled it maybe a couple of years ago with Jennifer Beal. And this is what they were looking into, but they were bringing in, some of the science behind it. It was absolutely, I think, a fascinating film, a fascinating series. If you ever get a chance to check it out, it's called Proof.
I will.
Trailer Proof. And there's two different ones. There's one with Gwyneth Paltrow, but that's an Anthony Hopkins. That's not the one I'm talking about. This is the one with Jennifer Beals. And just the trailer alone, you will absolutely love.
I'll check that out for sure.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So, what would you say, maybe your next explosive experience? That let you know Dad is here. Did the situation, or did the experience keep stepping up to some degree the more open you became, or what has that been like for you, or what was it like?
I had a series of incredible things happen. A lot of them objective things, such like butterflies, for instance, right? Which I know skeptics will say that everyone thinks butterflies are signs, and it's not that you're suddenly seeing butterflies at special moments. You're just noticing it now and assigning a meaning to it. So in the book, I describe what the skeptics say, right? So I'm aware of all of that, but some of the things that happened particularly with butterflies, are impossible for me to explain away. Just for a quick one that happened when Penn and Teller, right, who are a well-known magician,
Right.
magic duo, and they are incredible skeptics. They are vehemently opposed to people who call themselves mediums because they believe there is no such thing as anything "quote unquote" paranormal. So their belief is that anyone calling themselves a medium is a morally corrupt person who is preying on the grieving, right? That's their belief about mediumship. And in their magic show, they have a bit called the psychic comedian, where they do a bit of mentalism. And mentalism is where someone can affect the illusion of mind reading. And it is incredible, right? There are some people who are amazing at this, and you cannot figure out how they do it. So they had come to do a show at one of the theaters because I work for the Nederlander theaters on Broadway. They were doing a show in one of our theaters, and I could go in and watch it anytime as an employee. And by this point, I had done a ton of my own research with a medium that I'd been working on making a documentary with. I'd been having her do readings for people, and I was bringing total strangers to her that I knew there was no way she could be Googling or investigating in any way. And she was blowing us away with the information she was getting. So I had really at this point come to believe without a doubt that she was the real deal and that my dad truly was here. And that was a beautiful place to be, right? So then I go and watch this show with Penn and Teller. And they do this mentalism trick, and it is astounding. It is as though they are mind reading. And Penn begins the bit by saying, everything you are about to see is BS, except he says the words. And they had a show on Showtime called BS, where they debunked things like mediums and anything paranormal. So he says, everything you're about to see is BS. And then he goes and does this amazing trick. And I was crestfallen. I walked out of that theater feeling crushed because I was thinking, well, maybe this woman that I'm working with, her name is Angelina Diana, maybe she's doing whatever it is Penn and Teller are doing in this trick. Maybe she has duped me into seeing something that wasn't really there. Now, Penn and Teller, of course, are master magicians, right? They've been working on this. They've been honing their skills for decades. Angelina, the woman that I was working with, she had like a full-time job for most of her life, and a family, and how she could have sort of behind the scenes been honing a craft to this level was hard to imagine, but that's what I was thinking. So I walked out of that that theater feeling crushed. And I decided to go back the next day just to try to figure out some of what they were doing. And I was standing in the back of the theater, and Penn is giving his little speech before the psychic bit. And he again is saying the words, everything you're about to see is BS. And he pauses for effect between the bull and the S. Mm-hmm. And in that pause, I see a fluttering up in the lights. Now, I'm in the Marquee Theater in Times Square on Broadway. The Marquee Theater is inside the Marquee Hotel, right? To get to the theater, you have to go inside the street level doors, up an escalator, through an outer set of doors, and then into another set of doors that lead into the theater, okay? It's not an easy path to get into the theater. And as Penn is saying these words, in that pause between B and S, I see the flutter, and it's a butterfly. And it's such a big butterfly that it starts floating around, and people in the theater are seeing it. So there's a little, wave going through the theater of, it's such an unusual sight. Not just to see a butterfly in Times Square at all is rather unusual. It's not like there's a whole lot of greenery in Times Square. It's all pavement and concrete. So that really was an incredible moment. And then it was as though my dad was saying to me, don't listen to this guy. He's telling you right now that this is all BS, but I'm here to tell you that it's not. And then a few days after that, I was back at my theater where Hamilton is. And I was telling my friend Marie, who I work with, about the experience. And I'm asking her, have you ever seen a butterfly in a theater before? And as we're having this conversation, and I'm telling her, I really feel like it's communication from my dad, out of the corner of my eye, I see a flutter. And sure enough, there's now a butterfly in our theater as we're having this conversation, and it lands up in a chandelier. And I have pictures in the book of some of my coworkers looking up at the chandelier, and you can see how the look of incredulity on their faces, right? And they don't even know the story about my connection to butterflies. The look you see on their faces is just at the shock of seeing a butterfly at all in a Broadway theater. And then not long after that, Penn was standing under that chandelier, leaning on my bar because he had come to see Hamilton. And I had a thought about, I'd wanted him to be in my documentary. But as he stood there, I just felt like my dad was giving me the message that there are some people who are going to be impenetrable, right? There are some people who are going to have a wall up and no amount of evidence is going to be strong enough. And there are places where your energy is better spent. So that butterfly one was pretty amazing.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And, as you speak about all of this, it keeps bringing me back to believe that why that has become a very significant piece in your quest, because you end up going right back to that each time.
That's right.
Believe, and I keep hearing that sort of echoing, even with the butterfly, with what you're experiencing there. You could hear that word coming back, believe. So it's like the message believe was there before he passed, because it was going to become extremely significant as you went along. Anyway,
I'm smiling very big right now because I actually hadn't quite put that together in that way, what you're saying right now. And you're so right. You're so right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as a matter of fact, well, my audience doesn't know that, but yes, I am able to do those things. I don't do them for people anymore, but I'm able to read. I don't now. I coach people, but I don't do that.
Oh, wow.
But,
fascinating. That's great.
I'm able to have those insights, and I have given messages in the past from other people that have passed. But so I know it's all just absolutely amazing. Now I'm going to throw this in for you and my audience as well, people who are skeptics. But when my aunt, the one that I mentioned, my wonderful aunt, when she passed, the day that she passed, actually she passed on Mother's Day. It was right after we all had dinner, and I went home, and then suddenly I got this call. I'm like, what? We just left. And I went over to the house, where she lived with her daughter. And while we're sitting there in dismay, I think maybe I'd gone to the hospital first with just to support her daughter, my cousin. And so we came back, and we're sitting there in the living room, right in the area that she had her heart attack, right there. And while I'm sitting there, out of nowhere comes this bright round ball, like of light, just bounced from that area of the rug, bounced right from there, right up and through the window.
Wow.
It was just, and I'm sitting there, and it can't get any plainer.
Right.
It just can't get any plainer. And I'm like, I'm trying to explain to her what just happened, because it was so quick.
Yeah.
But yes, there's just so much that we just don't know about this life. And I think it's fascinating, and it's exciting what you're doing.
Yeah. That's such a great story. And I mean, by the end of my own experience, the last chapter of the book, I write about something that happened to me that I actually hesitated to put it in the book because it's going to be so far beyond the average person's sense of what's possible. I thought, oh man, they're going to read this whole book and get to the end and think, oh, this guy's just crazy. But in the end, I had
not alone.
Right. But what you were just saying about that ball of light, it can't get any clearer than that, right? I saw something happen with my own eyes. I was sitting beside a New York Times journalist when it happened, and she's written about it in her own book as well. I only mention that because a journalist, for the time, someone who's a professional journalist, has to be very careful about what they say, and especially careful about what they write, right? Because their word is their livelihood. Yes. So you can trust that I am telling you absolutely the truth. And I saw something with my own eyes that has now left me in zero doubt, because what we saw was not subjective. Something physical happened there in the room. And it was so powerful because it now has given me the knowledge that no matter how much smarter these scientists might be than I am, right? And certainly they are, many of them are. If they tell you that there is no such thing as anything paranormal, they are not right about that. I now know that to be a 100% fact. because I now know that paranormal things, and that's not even the right word now. I don't even like using
It
the word.
isn't.
Yeah.
It's not the right word. We're dealing with different realms and pockets of time. I think
Yes.
that's kind of, if we were to just, for a quick summary of that, it's just that realization. We're just very narrow in our perception
Yes.
of time and reality and what that looks like.
Agreed.
Yeah. So no, and I think you come to that place where you just share your truth. You share what you have experienced up until this point, and I don't think it matters. The people that are narrow or say that it's ridiculous. That's how I feel anyway. I'm
Mm-hmm.
completely unbothered and by it. I don't really care.
Yeah.
You have to get to that place.
Yeah. And the way I see it now, the information is out there for those who seek it, right? If you want to dive deeper into this stuff, the information is available to you, and that's what my book is for. I agree with you that it's there are some people that are I wouldn't even call them skeptics. I'd call them debunkers, in the sense that they go into it with a preconceived notion. They already know what they're going to find, right? They
Right, to
already
discredit it or
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think you're right that there's little use in spending a lot of energy on someone who's just not going to be open to that kind of a thing. But the information is out there. The reason that I wrote the book is because I got such comfort out of what happened to me. Once you're not completely worried about the end of the journey, it makes the journey itself so much lighter, so much happier, right? At least it
Right.
has for me, to now have no doubt that my dad is still there, to have no doubt that life goes on. It makes my life here and now just so much sweeter. So the book is there because I hope it will bring comfort to some people who might be looking for comfort.
Oh yes, and that's precisely what it does. I mean, yes, I have done interviews on this. I think with Dr. Moody, but this has been some
Mm-hmm.
time ago that we've talked about this. There's so many cases of this, so many. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
even from doctors, what they've seen, what they've experienced, and I think in our world now we're seeing much of this incorporated into films.
Mm-hmm.
The code, even though that was really about the consciousness um still being alive, and they're able to communicate with this consciousness even though the body was pretty much destroyed. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if you
Mm-hmm.
remember the film called The Code.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
you're
yeah, there's a lot. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is sort of percolating up now into a bit more of mainstream culture, right? Even if it's not yet accepted in our most prestigious labs, even if maybe you're not going to learn about this in a class at Harvard yet, it is starting to infiltrate, I think, us on a societal level anyway, in our movies, in our conversations, in podcasts like yours, or radio, or shows like yours. The message is coming through in my opinion.
Oh yes, it's coming through, and even in prestigious institutions. I think what fascinates me is that while they might not necessarily say it specifically like this,
Mm-hmm.
they are providing a lot of science and a lot of information that actually supports the
Oh yeah.
thing that they're avoiding. So
Yeah.
that's what I find funny.
Yeah, what was astounding to me is the the evidence for reincarnation, right? Kids who have these memories of previous lives. The evidence is astounding. It's been accumulated over 50 years, primarily at the University of Virginia. Right now, it's the Division of Perceptual Studies, headed up by Dr. Tucker, Jim Tucker, and Dr. Tucker's become a friend of mine now. And the Journal of the American Medical Association it's one of the most respected scientific journals in the whole world, right? If JAMA came out tomorrow and told us that, oh, you know what, we were wrong about saturated fat in eggs. It's not quite as bad for you as we thought it was. That would be splashed across our headlines,
Oh
right?
yes.
But The editor, the JAMA book editor, after he read Dr. Ian Stevenson's book, that's the guy who started this research. After he read his book, the JAMA book editor concluded that reincarnation is the most likely explanation. And no one heard about it. So you're right. It's not that it's not being done at some respected institutions. It is being done in some places, but for various reasons, it's just sort of being kept under wraps.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we could go into all the various reasons why, but
Right.
I think it's up to the human being, up to the individual to become curious enough. I think we
Yes.
are independent agents here, and I think
Right.
that it's up to us as to what you want to know. I don't think in the end anything is being kept from us, but I think we have to be the ones that are curious enough and committed enough to open up those doors for ourselves and our minds and all of that. And Proof, that film I was talking about, that series, that's part of what they're touching on. It's the idea of reincarnation. So you have the scientist, that's working with this billionaire to really explore all of this, because it all ties together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are so many different lines of evidence, and the ways that they overlap are fascinating to me. There are parts of the near death experiences that overlap with children who have memories of past lives. A lot of them have what's called an intermission memory, this kind of place in between the lives. And that some of that overlaps with what near death experiencers tell us. So if you take the evidence as a whole, all of these different lines of evidence, I mean, to me, it seems very, very clear that at the very least, we can conclude consciousness is not confined to the skull. I mean, at the very least, we can conclude that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I want to ask you, how does your family, how have they approached this? What's their feelings on this? Are you the most invested person in, this kind of exploration?
I was at the beginning, but now they are completely on board for the ride here. They have. I'm lucky in that my family is very, very close and accepting, and they have experienced all of this for themselves now, and they have no doubt now as well that my dad is still with us. So for my family as a whole, this experience has been an unbelievable gift from my father. I mean, I can't say that enough, that this is all because of my dad. I don't feel like I feel like this happened to us because of him. I don't feel like it's something we sought out. He made all of these dominoes fall. That's how it seems to me now. So luckily my family is right along with me on this crazy ride.
That's wonderful. Very enriching experience. And it does kind of make you, wonder to some degree. There is probably some greater purpose why you needed to understand this. And it would seem sometimes that somebody, in a way, sacrificed themselves because they're a greater reason that you don't yet see.
I've had mediums say that to me, actually, that very thing, that my dad's death was meant to happen this way because it was going to move us in this direction. So yeah, you're not the first medium, and I'll call you a medium now. You're not the first medium to tell me.
I said, okay, well, I'm not going to go too much deeper into it, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's clearly, what I saw. I mean, there's always other things I just see, but I want to make sure that you, give out your information. We've got a few minutes left. Anything that you want to share, your website, which I mentioned, but you can mention that again, and anything else you'd like to mention.
Sure. Yeah. The website is the main one. It's mikeanthony.com, and the books, both of the books are there. And then I also post clips because beyond the Netflix series, I was making my own documentary when that came along. And I think I'm going to end up going back to that, once the world has gotten a little bit more back to normal and it's safe again. I'm going to pick that documentary up again. And on the website, there are some clips, video clips of what we're up to. And we'll try to keep that updated as well. So yeah, it's mikeanthony.com.
Now, is the documentary based on this? Is it, all of this? I don't know what you can share.
Sure. Yeah. No, it is. Yeah. It's the Netflix series is great, but it kind of just scratches the surface of the evidence that's out there. It's kind of aimed at people who maybe have not heard of a lot of this stuff ever before. And my documentary is going to go a little more in depth into the evidence that's available.
Oh, beautiful. That's going to be fantastic. Yeah, I can, have these conversations forever, which is why the show is called The Expansion Zone, because my mind goes far and wide, and I like to bring this kind of information to the audience because in the end, it all comes back to connecting with our own understanding about our curiosity and why we're here. What is
Mm.
what is it to be a human being? So I think there's a lot that's tied up in wanting to become curious and be more open in one's mind. And in the end, it still all connects with moving, how the human race moves forward, how evolution is impacted. So it seems like a small thing, and the butterfly, the metamorphosis, I mean, it was
Yes. Right.
perfect. It was
Right.
absolutely perfect. So, yes, I do want to thank you so much. And I would love to have you back as you go along. When the film is ready, definitely let me know so we can have you back on and chat about it.
I'd love to do that. Thanks so much for doing what you're doing, and thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, we are at the end of our show, and I thank my guest, Mike Anthony, and of course, you, the listening audience. Be sure to visit theexpansionzone.com for the archive for this show and other shows, and also YouTube, the YouTube channel. Subscribe. I also have the shows there as well, and many other things are on the YouTube channel. And to find out more about me, my work, visit therealsoniabarrett.com and check me out on social media, Instagram, all of that stuff, Facebook, friend me, the whole 9 yards. Thanks to our engineer. And again, as always, I like to remind you to live life to its fullest and question everything. Until next time, see you then.